was about 32 years old, my ex-husband and I decided to divorce. Our son was 6 years old at the time, and now we've been at co-parenting for 23 years. Unbelievable, really. To say he's 29 is kind of ground shaking in itself. And in that time, we really learned how to utilize a foundational principle to forge a successful co-parenting relationship. So when I met my new husband, after we were divorced for about 8 years, I met my new husband, and we've been together now for 15 years. And he has 2 children from a previous marriage. So I've been step parenting those children for 15 years. And at the start of that, I was so excited to create my family 2.0, where you have this successful, happy family unit that everyone gets along and we live happily ever after. And I had already come through the transition that occurs when new adults come into the scenario with my ex-husband, who had already gotten remarried. And I thought, that went pretty well. I actually could have seen me meeting her out and becoming friends with his new wife, even if I hadn't met her through him. So when I met my new husband's ex-wife, I expected things to maybe be a little bit of a transition phase, but to become wonderful over time. It might take a while, and I was willing to be patient. I didn't know I was going to have to be quite this patient. But let's just say for the first 10 years, we had a pretty rocky existence. So as we came upon the point where these children, who I think I already said were 9 and 6 at the time we met, had transitioned into late high school and college years, there was a situation where the daughter came home from college, and she had really not spent much time in our home throughout high school. So it was wonderful to have her home for the weekend, spending some time with us. And as she walked into my kitchen, she plopped down an Easter basket on my counter. And I said, "Oh, what's that?" She said, "Oh, my mom told me to bring it to you. She had an extra one. She made these for the team that I'm on." And I thought, wow, that's actually very unexpected and okay. So I just kind of let it sit there. And later that night, I overheard my stepdaughter telling her dad that her mom had caught a lot of grief for these simple little Easter baskets she had created for the team that my stepdaughter was on. And I thought, well, that seems kind of silly. It's just a little Easter basket. Seems like it was just a nice thing to do for the girls. And it was something she had done all the time for the teams as our stepdaughter had come up through the sporting world. And so I thought, I haven't even extended a thank you to her. Now, am I treating her the way I would want to be treated by my founding principle of the golden rule? Well, maybe not so far. So I decided to text her, because we weren't really on close enough terms that I would call her at this point. So I sent her a nice simple text saying, "Thank you so much for the Easter basket. I really appreciate you sending that to me." And she responded with a, "You're welcome. I'm glad you like it." And we had gotten through one exchange with zero conflict, which was quite an amazing feat. And so I thought, this is maybe an opportunity, and let's just see if we can take this one step further. And I said to her in text still, "I heard you caught some grief from one of the other moms, and I just wanted you to know that I thought it was a very kind thing to do." And so she responds to me at that point, says, "Thank you so much for telling me that. I really needed to hear it." And I thought, well, that's kind of an extreme response to a simple thank you. So I felt I wanted to know just a little more about what really happened with this other mom. And I asked her in the return text, well, what did the other mother say to you? And she said, she thought it was over the top. I guess she got into her face at an actual game in the middle of everything. And she eventually says to my stepdaughter's mom, well, do you want to take it outside? And I'm like, okay, we've got two middle-aged women here, right? And all I can picture is the two of them like getting into a brawl, pulling each other's hair and rolling in some school parking lot at a university. And just the craziness of that struck a little humor bone in me. And I responded to her knowing full well that she is also, or was also, a college athlete and very fit and into, daily workouts and the whole thing. And I said, well, I have one question for you. Could you take her? And she responded with a bunch of emojis. And I tell you, in that moment, it was like a great thaw had begun. And that was the beginning of a transformation in our relationship to foes, from foes to fans. Mm-hmm. And at this point, we now can eagerly look forward to joining each other in family celebrations together with all the kids present. And so my message would be, just because it doesn't start off great doesn't mean it can't become great over time. And you just have to look for the opportunity, even after 10 years.
Well, hello, this is Gina.
And this is Don.
We're with Focused Healthy Family. This is podcast number 27. Today, we are talking with Teresa Harlow about co-parenting and divorce. But before we get to our conversation, let's hear a word from our sponsor. Today's podcast is sponsored by Q Sciences. Don and I discovered that the supplements we were taking and giving to our children were not being absorbed properly. I was very excited when I found Q Sciences. I was impressed with the quality of the products and that they provide maximum absorption. They have a variety of products, including a Q Max product, which is a combination of 3 products, including vitamins, minerals, and a probiotic. They also have hemp oil, a vitamin B12 spray, a sleep spray, and kids products. I've really seen a difference in how these products are improving how I feel, improving my mental health, and I'm happy with the quality of these products and how they're helping our whole family. If you'd like to learn more,
simply go to qsciences.focusedhealthyfamily.com. That's the letter Q, sciences.focusedhealthyfamily.com. Or you can find a link on the front page of the focusedhealthyfamily.com website.
And stop throwing your money away on supplements that don't work and use a quality product like Q Sciences. We're back and we're talking with Teresa Harlow, who just shared her wonderful story, and we'll get more into that. Teresa Harlow is a best-selling author, a speaker, a co-parenting coach, and a family mediator. She spent over 30 years helping individuals, families, and teams transform combative relationships into collaborative partnerships to achieve extraordinary results. Her best-selling book, Combative to Collaborative, The Co-Parenting Code, has been endorsed by the world-renowned author Jack Canfield from Chicken Soup for the Soul and Dr. Gary Chapman from the 5 Love Languages. You can read more about her in our description and on her website at teresaharlow.com. Welcome, Teresa.
Thank you, Gina. I'm so glad you and Dawn decided to have me on.
Yes, this has been an adventure for us, since neither of us had divorced parents and neither of us have been through divorce, but it's such a powerful topic with parenting that, we've been seeking out all kinds of people to interview to address this topic. And I love your story. I just getting the whole picture of it. You just got into the groove of understanding your experience, and that your imagery there with the 2 women fighting out in the parking lot. Just
Right? It just really lended itself to a moment where I thought, well, maybe she can see that I'm not such a terrible person to communicate with. I can be fun.
Yeah. And that's just beautiful how it evolved, and, and just something simple, like a simple thank you and
Right.
acknowledgement of people. It fits right in with all of our communication tools that we teach. And as I'm learning about you and what you do in your work, very similar. So.
Well, and if there's any part of that I would say I regret, it's why did it take me 10 years to apply the same lessons I had found successful with other relationships and even with business teams. I mean, I've restored and helped people draw bridges to each other using this same approach for a long time. So I wish it could have been something that occurred to me a little sooner.
And then just curious, did she get into a brawl in that?
Not to my knowledge. I think I
Okay.
would have heard about
She
it.
didn't share that.
We had to get that conclusion out there,
We're all
you know.
very
Right?
curious,
But she definitely could have taken her. Kickboxes every morning.
wow.
Oh my, okay. Well, you know, and what I was looking forward to talking to you today about, because you, in your book, you have 3 stages, you know, the uncoupling part, and then life goes on. And that's the part right there. The second part is where I'd like to really kind of delve in with you, because we've talked about the divorce part and collaborative divorce and all of that.
Yeah, we've talked to a collaborative lawyer, mediators, looking at it just from that perspective. But really looking at the parenting aspect and, you know, the after the fact of.
Yeah, because, you know, the divorce decree, getting to that point is one thing, getting that parenting plan in place, but there's a whole lifetime of parenting in front of you. So, you know, I hope that my book tackles that, because I think that's where those nagging problems can surface and really fester inside of relationships and break them down over time.
Mm-hmm.
Well, yeah, and then too, the third part is the corrective part. I think is, I'm trying to remember the exact title, but
yeah, it's correcting course.
Yeah, and you know that your story kind of pins that out, that
Right.
this doesn't all get settled out on the divorce. There, you know, things change, and when one little thing changes, it can change the whole dynamic of it. So
It really can, and to a degree, you have to kind of not start over, but you're starting with a new relationship with this third party potentially involved. And the interesting thing about that story I told is that, you know, people have asked me, well, how do you get past your anger with the other person? How do you move forward? And I thought about that. And this is where the correcting course really kind of was born from. One of my friends asked me that. We were too angry at each other, he would say, to even get to the point to have a civil conversation. And I said, you know what? You don't. And what I mean by that is you don't expect an apology. You don't forgive necessarily. You just move on. You set it aside and allow yourself to focus on the present and forward.
Yeah.
Because there's really nothing you can do about the past anyway, other than to learn from it.
Mm-hmm.
well, and you focus a lot on the what is and what is important. I thought that was really a big key in there, you know, because I was looking, I think it was one of your videos or one of your articles, you just talked about the fact of get away from your wanting revenge or
Right.
what you want to do to the other person or how much you hate them or whatever, and focus on what is most important, which is, of course, I believe, the kids and the family. And
You know, and yes, I agree with that, the kids and the family, but even your personal enhanced if you focus not on continuing a conflict. If you don't want a conflict, don't focus on it.
Mm-hmm.
Focus on, you know, what is going to move your happiness forward. And having a co-parenting team member is usually going to enhance your experience as a parent.
Right.
Rather than going it alone, right?
Right. Yeah. And creating that adversarial situation where if you're just angry at that other person and you can't get past that, it's just going to keep you stuck in that.
Yeah. And I mean, you've already decided that relationship that romantic relationship is over.
Right.
So putting additional energy there, either to, you know, get back at them or to continue to make them suffer, really does you no good, because then when you need their cooperation or information from them, they're going to be less likely to demonstrate that courtesy to you.
Right.
When you also talk about the golden rule, I
Yes.
thought that was, so talk a little bit about where that idea even came from and kind of, I guess, what it
As it
means.
applies to, divorce.
Well, okay. So I have a full keynote I do on lessons from mom.
Okay.
And I don't mean this mom, me, I mean my mom.
Okay.
And so I remember when I was in, I don't know, 4th grade or something, one of my little girlfriends in the neighborhood had made me angry. And I wrote her this nasty letter. I'm in my room, I'm writing it out, and I told her I don't want to be friends anymore and all of this stuff. And my mom came in the room. She's like, "What are you doing?" I said, "I'm writing Tammy a letter. I'm mad at her and I don't want to be friends with her anymore." I don't even remember what it was that she had done. But my mom took the note, she read it. She's like, "Are you sure you want to give this to her?" And I said, "Well, yeah, she made me angry and I want her to know about it because, well, my mom on the other side of things had always told me, stand up for yourself and speak your truth and all of this." And so she said to me, "Terry," and because she calls me Terry, "Terry, if you got nothing nice to say, don't say anything. So what I'm going to ask you to do is put this aside for today and come back and read it tomorrow and see if you really want to give that to Tammy and if you would like someone to give you that, letter that says that to you." And she said, "You need to treat others the way you want to be treated."
Mm-hmm.
And that's the golden rule.
Yep.
And you know what? A lot of people will say, "Well, yeah, but really the platinum rule is where it's at." I hear this a lot every time I say the golden rule. The platinum rule is treat others the way they want to be treated. That assumes a whole bunch of things. You know how they want to be treated.
Yeah. We're frozen.
In any moment. And you don't necessarily have that scenario. So the platinum rule is treat others the way they want to be treated, which sounds great. And I would agree it's ideal. But to be honest, do we know how the other person wants to be treated? We may or may not, depending on how well we know them. We can take a good guess. But there's no question, what you would not want someone to say to you.
Right.
So you can start with that as a basis for how you move forward. And I jokingly tell a lot of my family professionals, sort of jokingly, you know what, even a narcissist can do it because now you've made it about them again. So tell them, treat others the way you want to be treated. That's your boundary. Stay in that lane and you'll be fine.
Yeah, I mean, I agree with that. And I know I've brought that issue up with my own kids and just, believe in that. And I hadn't heard
I was going to say what happens is that people go into it not treating someone the way they want to be treated, but the way they think that other person has maybe deserved to be treated, what they've earned. And, again, now you're focusing on the conflict and the anger rather than what you really want in a relationship.
The whole idea of the eye for eye, tooth for tooth. Well, you treated me this way, so I'm going to treat you back. And it's like,
well, and that's an ongoing cycle, right? You put it out there, it comes back, and you need to demonstrate, you really do need to demonstrate only behaviors that you want someone to reflect back to you. Otherwise, you're just setting yourself up.
Right.
I was curious too, as you call it, a co-parenting code. What is it? I'm not, we have a young one that does coding, so I'm looking at data and
programming. So,
Well, it's interesting you say that because my background in corporate America was in leading large technology projects and programs. So I did, look over the shoulders of a lot of coders over the course of 20, 30 years, give or take. And so I think of code as a program that you can follow that will work hopefully without defect and it's tested. and tried and true. And so, the other thing about code is when you think of code of ethics. If you have a code of ethics to live by, and you can share those with someone whom you have a relationship, then you have a fighting chance of forging a caring, trusting path forward.
That makes sense.
You have a question?
I kind of got lost in my thought for a minute. So applying that to the, your book and I'm fumbling over my words. We're going to need to do a lot of
Yeah, I'll make that note too.
There you go.
Well, I noticed you
Note the
really
time.
focused on listening, which is good.
Yeah, and then
I was getting ready to try to write a note. Get the ready next question.
Yeah, it's hard.
So I feel like I don't want to hog the whole thing with my question.
Don's been interviewing longer than me. Okay, so following the code in relation to divorce, if you can elaborate on that.
Yeah, so at the end, I'll give you the example of how I use it in the book. At the end of each chapter, after I've taken the reader through, here's the scenario we're dealing with. Here are combative behaviors that I've observed across a number of examples through the years, either in my personal roles as parent, step-parent, or as a friend or family member. So after I explain the scenario, then I take the reader into the combative behaviors that I've experienced, seen happen across either friends, family, or my own relationships over time. And I expose those, I highlight them. I say, look, we need to come to terms with these things. And hopefully I give the reader that is the one that may be exhibiting these things, a little self-awareness. And then the party that may be on the receiving end of that, a little bit of guidance of how to redirect that. After we come through the combative behaviors, then I go into, here are your do's and don'ts for staying aligned to collaborative behaviors. I tell a little story in there that's relevant to that. And then at the end, I give the reader a list of questions and thoughts to provoke their thinking about, are they really seeing this from a perspective of the golden rule? And so that is where I kind of package that area of the book, or at the end of each chapter, actually, as the co-parenting code. It's to get them thinking about how to align their mindset to that principle.
What if about going into some of the do's and don'ts, like
as relating to parenting?
Well, yeah, in that like middle stage, that what is that? What do you give do's and don'ts for all the stages, or just any certain one? Or
yeah, I try to. Each chapter kind of tackles a certain scenario that co-parents will encounter. Parents encounter these same scenarios, but when you live in potentially two different homes, or you have additional adults involved in the scenario, they play out differently. I mean, let's face it, you're navigating a lot of schedules and just a lot more limitations on the communications that you have with your co-parenting team member, that I like to call them. One of those pitfalls I see a lot of divorced parents and separated parents fall into is a difficulty applying discipline. Where I see it most is probably with the parent that maybe has less time with the child. Maybe they're not the custodial parent, or even those that have 50-50 shared parenting, they've still given up half of their parenting time. And so when they have their kids, the last thing they want to do is make it unpleasant. So they maybe don't take the time to teach them responsibility. They don't impose limits. They let them play video games all day, or whatever it is that maybe is something they know in their mind they should probably be doing something about, but they just can't bear the thought of, one, making that scant time they have with this child unpleasant, or two, driving them away because maybe the rules are slightly different at the other house and they won't want to come see you anymore. Yeah. So, the parent abandons discipline or really doesn't carry it out very well. And the child suffers because someone's got to teach them these things, and you're assuming the other parent's going to pick up the slack that you're, exhibiting. And maybe they won't either. They may be found in the same place as you are. And then the child just doesn't learn what they need to learn to be a responsible, caring, and, productive human.
So what kind of advice do you give them in that area? And I this would kind of lead into about communication, I would think would be a big part of it, but what other things do you recommend when in that kind of situation?
Yeah, absolutely, Dawn. Communication is key for pretty much all of the topics, really. But backing each other up is important, and you don't have to agree with whatever rule is being imposed at the other house. It's okay to have different rules, assuming that both are on the same page with things like safety and risky behaviors and a common definition of what's right and wrong. But, people ask me this a lot. Well, they have different rules at their dad's house. What am I supposed to do about that? Well, unless it's risking their life or, their safety, there's probably not a lot you can do about it. You can, explain to your child, though, that we have different rules. I respect the rules that your other parent, whoever they are, father, mother, has at their house. We have different situations in each home, and you are expected to follow the rules for the house you are in. And when it comes to safety things, these are the rules we both support and expect you to follow no matter where you're at. I even tell parents, you can impose, let's say, a penalty if the other parent grounds your child because they were out past curfew, and then they come to your house and they were supposed to be grounded for the whole month, but now it's only been a week and they're at your place. That doesn't mean you have the benefit. You could go ahead and impose that. And even if your rule is different, let's just say the rule is different at your place. The fact is, you're not saying that the rule is going to change at this house, but that I support the rule that your other parent has chosen for you to follow. And I will back them up on that, because otherwise what happens is you undercut that other parent's authority. And God forbid it's something that does have to do with safety or, some other aspect of their life that could really turn it on a dime.
Sure. Yeah, I imagine that's one of the most challenging things. I mean, the media portrays this. And I've been hearing stories from friends, but if one parent's the good parent, one parent's the bad parent, then they get pitted against each other. And then the kid is like, I'd rather be here. I mean, teens kind of do that anyhow when they're, even if you're together as a
That's right.
couple, I hate you. Mom said this,
they'll play you. And that's why, another reason why communicating is so important, because what the child is telling you, you need to get more than one side of the story here, because they may be, manipulating the scenario for their own benefit, knowing that you two, if they know you're not communicating, then that gives them, an open door to.
Yeah. It creates a whole nother opportunity, so to speak, for them.
Yeah, right.
Since the holidays are coming up, and when we air this, it'll be even closer. Just what kind of tips would you have and recommend for people out of divorce where, the holidays brings up, like you talked about, navigating time and different places. And I imagine that's, just the extended family aspect of it. So.
Oh, yeah. Well, the holidays are already stressful for parents, right? Because you got your work, you got your home to take care of, and the normal child rearing things, and then you've got extra parties and all the planning that goes around family gatherings and gift buying and all of that. And I would say, really there's two basic things, and then a lot of things that underlie those. Plan. Don't expect the holidays to be as easy for you as a divorced parent as they were when you were parents together. I mean, you're going to have to work harder. This, while you can make co-parenting a very happy and amicable existence, it just imposes a lot more dynamics that have to be considered. There are more schedules, like you said, and just a lot more moving parts. Sharing information about, what gifts are you buying? Do you have a budget that you're following? So that, one thing I think is really can create animosity between parents is if one is showering the child with everything they ever asked for, and their intention, right, is to just make the child happy. But if another parent doesn't have those means, then you've put them in this really awkward scenario of trying to measure up. Sure. And or look, disappoint the child and put them in a situation where they're comparing and all this crap.
Right.
So I always say, if you can get on the same page with coordinating that, and we used to actually even coordinate to the extended family level. So grandparents, my son was the first grandchild for like 8 years. Okay. You can't even imagine the number of toys. I mean, it was just ungodly. He would get bored unwrapping gifts. I'm like, you guys got to back off, seriously. But I joke about that, but we did, as he got older, especially, and this is important for the separated and divorced parents. As kids get older, the gifts get to be a little more expensive. And, if you want to buy a large gift and don't have the means to do it on your own, reach out to that other co-parent, see if it's something they want the child to have also. Don't expect it. Don't do it without asking them, but consider bringing them in on it and, crowdfunding that big gift, making sure that both are recognized for their contribution to it, that the child knows that. And, if that's something you can work out, it's a win-win for everyone.
Sure. Yeah, I mean, we've done that just as limited means, we get a brother and sister and parents, and like, I'll go in on a big gift, a video game console or something the kid wants. Yeah. That.
I was kind of curious whether you've ever had a combined holiday, like with your ex and his, whether you had like a big family kind of thing where they were invited too.
Yeah, we've actually, and I'm fortunate, not everybody can pull this off. So, there are limits that some people can't get past. But in my case, we were able to do that. The first year that we separated in like that July. So that December, I invited my ex-husband to stay in the guest room of my house so that when we woke up in the morning for our child's, sixth Christmas morning, he was there to witness that. The next year, he was still single. My ex-husband was still single, and he invited me to stay at his house and do the same thing. Now we outgrew that level of sharing, but I was still invited to join his family for holiday gatherings for many, many years. And even most recently, we got together to celebrate, several family milestones, all in one home. And I had quite a close relationship and continue to have a close relationship with my in-laws from my ex-husband, because that was important to me. And I did want my son to enjoy that, because you get a lot of support from that extended family as a child. And those relationships are important. They didn't go away just because you guys divorced. They're still there. And maybe you didn't like them. Maybe that wasn't your thing. But the child probably does. And so recognizing that is still their family is something you should enable.
Yeah, well, you don't really divorce grandparents or even aunts and uncles for that matter.
That's right.
They are still aunts and uncles to them.
Yeah. But, it's unfortunate that a lot of those extended family members do fall away for many. And one of the things I suggest in the book with regard to extended family is, if it's your ex's family, and you want your child to be involved with them on an ongoing basis, let them know, talk to those family members and say, I want our son to continue to engage with you, and I'll try to make that possible. I'm going to share, school schedules with you for performances and things, and keep you abreast of those situations so that you can do that. But letting them know that, because they may be thinking, well, maybe she doesn't want to interact with us anymore. Maybe it's too hard or too awkward, and letting those other family members know that you are interested in staying in their life can go a long way in building that.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Just navigating those. And I imagine that it's one thing when you're separated or divorced and you're still singles. And I can only imagine the challenge of, okay, now we've got, your ex-husband's married to someone else and you're married to someone else, and how that affects the child and navigating that, especially obviously it's different for a younger child versus a teenager. But yeah, just you could speak more on kind of navigating that as, from a parent perspective.
With regard to the blending of families.
Yeah. And just, dealing with your own issues, like you told the story, about your, your ex-husband's new wife, and just, the dynamic of how that's affecting the children. And
yeah,
especially when things aren't always going smoothly, right? And how you discuss that with the child if things are contentious.
Well, I can tell you from, and it's not necessarily what my child's impact was from it, but for me, it was like, becoming a step parent was, I can tell you from my perspective, it's more difficult to be a step parent than a parent. And the reason I say that is because you share all the burden, but none of the credit. Yeah. And you certainly have far less, if any, influence over the situation. You really have to understand acceptable boundaries there for what your role is.
Right.
So, I have a particular style, but that doesn't mean I have the right to impose that style on two parents that are not my child.
Right.
So that was a difficult thing for me because I'm kind of a control freak on certain things anyway. I like things a certain way, maybe. But I had to release that and realize that my way wasn't the only successful way to parent. There are other approaches, and looking at those two parents, my husband and his ex, they were successful, functional people. So I didn't have to worry about that. Not like they were like, in trouble with the law or anything extreme, where that may have been totally different.
Right. Yeah, that's another avenue, I'm sure.
But I think the big thing is planning. I mean, it sounds so mundane. It's like, wow, that's not very, deep. But truly, planning and communicating are the basis for avoiding a lot of conflicts and misunderstandings, setting expectations between the parties, and remembering that you're not the only one to consider. So back to that whole, I sound like a broken record, but back to that whole golden rule thing, remembering that there are other parties to consider, whether it's their schedule or what information they need in order to be the best parent they can be. I mean, you're going to be a better parent if you enable the other parents in the scenario to do their best job, not by making it more difficult for them.
Yeah, and it makes perfect sense, and goes right along with our children learn from us even when we don't want them to. So our example is the best teacher, and so you're not only dealing with this situation of, co-parenting in separate households, but your child is learning from you and how you handle that.
That's right. And you hit on something there. Even when you don't want them to, they learn from you. So if you're going to, you've got, let's say your ex starts dating someone or gets in a relationship with someone or even marries them, and you don't like them, and you tell your child, well, this is what's wrong with that other person, they're whatever your griefs are, and you share that with them, they're going to look first to probably protect you and take your side because you're their child or they're your child. It just sets that other parent up and the other home up for conflict that you wouldn't want brought into your home.
Right.
So, kind of, we're getting close in time here. Just wanted to just kind of touch base on your book a little bit, like kind of talk about what it is, how it can help people, what it's about, because it's combative to I can't. I'll let you say
it. Sure. You know what? I should have picked fewer syllables for the words in my title. It's combative to collaborative, the co-parenting code.
I like the alliteration of it, but yeah, tell us more about your book.
Well, I'm all about results. I don't accept that I have to, live a life that isn't of my own design. And so that's kind of where the title comes from. It suggests movement, a transformation from a place where you might be currently to where you want to be, from combative to collaborative. So that's the signal I'm sending there. Hey, this is what you're in for. We're going to transform things and it's going to improve your life. And I work to provide parents both the foundational principles like the golden rule, and then help them understand how they can apply that in very specific situations that they will encounter that will be somewhat different as separated parents than when they were together.
Right.
Highlighting those combative behaviors, giving them the do's and don'ts for collaborative behaviors so that they can have that chance to build a strong relationship with that other parent that they're reliant on for their child's upbringing.
Sure.
It has the 3 stages, as Dawn, you kind of hit on earlier. So whether you've been recently separated or divorced, you're going to see the early stage examples and scenarios in the uncoupling stage. Stage 2 is what we've mostly been talking about here, which is life goes on and you continue to evolve and the children continue to get older and grow and go through lots of things. And then you've got the correcting course. And a lot of times parents may need to start with stage 3 because they may be so on 2 different planets that they have to attack that first before they can move forward with the other stages, and then they can double back.
Sure.
But it's a guide, it's a guide for co-parenting in all stages. Because parenting is for life. It doesn't end with the divorce decree and it doesn't end when they're 18 either. I'm sorry to tell anybody that was counting down the days, but
we definitely know that one.
That's 20.
My son's engaged now.
Okay.
And God willing, he'll probably have kids someday. And we're going to continue to interact with his dad and that portion of the family for the rest of our lives if we want to enjoy those moments with our son and his wife.
Right. And then adding grandparents in.
Yeah.
I want to double back to, when you talked about your book and that you're giving examples of how they can handle situations and kind of real life, just the power of that someone even just at the beginning stages can think, okay, these are things I want to avoid, as a preventative measure, even as well as for those who went, okay, all right, that happened. Yeah, I'd like to do it differently from here on out. Or so.
Well, and if I can just add this one thing. So I gave a copy of the early version of this book to several people. And one of them, a friend of mine, reached out and he said, I like the book. And this was before I was done with it. But I have one problem with it. And I'm like, okay, that's exactly why I asked you to read it. He said, my ex-wife would never read this. It tells it, when I started writing it, I was like, okay, here's what people are doing wrong. Don't do that. Do this instead. And I went through all these things about these are the bad things you're doing.
Okay.
And here's how you should do it instead. That was kind of my general thinking.
Right.
And when he said that, it occurred to me, I haven't given any help to the victim of that behavior,
Okay.
but you're never helpless in the scenario, because you can redirect conflict to a better place, given a process and some tools to work with to do that. And I've always found having that kind of guidance, even if I don't feel it, I can maybe fake it until I make it. And then it becomes ingrained over time. So that's what I hope to offer to those that find themselves on the receiving end of high conflict or even moderate conflict behavior, are ways to bring the interactions back to focusing on what they really want, which is to raise happy kids and find their own personal happiness.
Makes a lot of sense. And it kind of circles right back around to the story you told about how you hung in there, knowing this might be messy with your ex-husband's new wife. And eventually you got to that place, right? Because it's staying in your truth, no matter what they're doing. So,
well, and, and there's sometimes a certain season in which things will happen.
Right.
Not everyone's ready right off the bat to embrace someone new in their life. They may have to work through some things that have nothing to do with you before they're in a place that makes sense for them. And so, it's kind of cliche, but we all have heard it. Everyone's going through something. So don't assume you're the only one.
Exactly. Well, we appreciate you being with us here today, and want to give you that chance. We will share your information and links on our page, but go ahead and tell people where they can learn more about you and your book.
Sure. Well, first, Dawn and Gina, thank you so much for having me. This was a pleasure. If someone wants to get in touch with me, they can go to my website at teresaharlow.com. And they'll find all kinds of information, articles, interviews that I've given on co-parenting and step parenting and everything about that whole dynamic that we live.
We really appreciate you being here. We've enjoyed this conversation.
That's our podcast for today. We hope you have enjoyed it. We would love to hear from you. Make sure to leave us a comment. If you like what you've heard today, you can learn more about our parent coaching program and more about Teresa, or join our next workshop. Simply go to www.focusedhealthyfamily.com or follow us on Facebook at Focused Healthy Family.
And remember, how you speak to your children shapes their future.